said it the way she said everything that mattered, quietly between bites without looking up from her plate. "We think it would be better if you didn't come to the opening." The opening. 3 months I had heard about nothing else. My brother's restaurant, the one my parents had co-signed a loan for, the one my father had helped negotiate the lease on, the one my mother had spent weekends painting the walls of, choosing the pendant lights, arranging the dried flower installations over the host stand. The grand opening, black tie, invited press, a photographer from a local food magazine, the kind of night our family talked about the way other families talked about weddings. I set my fork down. Why? My father cleared his throat, not because he needed to. He did it whenever he was about to say something he'd already decided and didn't want to defend. "It's a professional event," he said. "Important people will be there. Your brother needs to make a certain impression." I looked at my brother across the table. He was cutting his chicken with careful, focused attention, the same way he had looked at his shoes during every difficult conversation our whole lives. "And I would affect that impression," I said. It wasn't a question. My mother finally looked up. "You know how you can be, sweetheart. You get quiet and people think you're unfriendly. This isn't the night for me," I finished. "For complications," she said. I nodded once. I didn't argue. I'd spent 29 years learning that arguing with my family in that kitchen was like talking into a wall. You just heard your own voice coming back at you, slightly flatter. So I said fine. I said I understood. I excused myself before dessert and drove home in the February dark with the heat broken in my car again, hands cold on the steering wheel, thinking about the letter I'd received that morning. The one I hadn't mentioned at dinner, the one still sitting on my kitchen counter, folded in thirds, with the embossed logo of the building's development group in the top left corner. I was the architect who had designed that restaurant, not the interior, not the decor my mother had so carefully curated. The structure, the bones, the building itself, which had been a crumbling 1940s dry goods warehouse before my firm spent 11 months transforming it into something that would make people stop on the sidewalk, the exposed brick we'd preserved, the vaulted ceiling we'd reinforced and opened up, the east-facing window wall that would fill the dining room with morning light on the day of a brunch service, which I had calculated and recalculated until the angle was exactly right. My brother didn't know I'd worked on it. He'd hired a development group. The development group had contracted my firm, and I had recognized the address in the project brief on a Tuesday afternoon last February. I'd sat with that knowledge for about an hour. Then I'd done the work because it was my job, and I was good at it. And what I did with that information afterward was something I hadn't yet decided. I decided that night, driving home with cold hands. I would go to the opening. Let me go back a little further, because you need to understand what kind of family I grew up in before you can understand why any of this matters. My brother is 4 years older than me and has my father's jawline and my mother's ability to make everyone in a room feel like they're his favorite person. Growing up, he was the one who got the car at 16, the one my parents flew to New York for his college graduation when they hadn't come to mine because, as my mother explained, Seattle was farther. The one who called home twice a week and got called back immediately, while my texts sometimes sat for days before my mother replied with a single emoji. I wasn't a difficult child. I was a quiet one, which my family treated as the same thing. I liked building models, drawing floor plans of houses I invented, rearranging furniture in my room to test different configurations. My father thought it was a phase. When I told him at 17 that I wanted to study architecture, he said, "That's a long program for a career with a lot of uncertainty." When I was accepted to a very good school on a merit scholarship, he said, "Well, let's hope the job market holds." When I graduated, licensed myself, and joined a mid-size firm that did solid commercial and mixed-use work, he asked at Christmas dinner if I was still doing the drafting thing. I'd been a licensed architect for 3 years at that point. There's a moment I keep coming back to. I was 24, fresh out of my graduate program, working 80-hour weeks and eating instant noodles and loving every minute of it because I was finally doing the thing I had always known I was supposed to do. I called home one Sunday evening excited because my firm had just been selected to lead a residential project in Capitol Hill. Small, but visible, the kind of thing that gets written up in local design blogs. I wanted to share it. My mother listened politely. Then she said, "That's nice, honey. Your brother just got a new investor for the restaurant idea he's been developing. Dad is so excited. We might actually get to see it happen." And she talked about my brother's restaurant concept for the next 20 minutes, while I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets, not saying anything, just listening to the sound of my own excitement leaving the room. I learned to stop sharing. That's the thing no one tells you about being the less favoured child. It's not just the big moments that cost you, it's the small ones. The Sunday calls, the dinner table conversations, the accumulated weight of being told in 100 quiet ways that what you were building didn't quite count. By the time my firm landed the warehouse conversion contract, I had worked on 14 completed projects. My name was on the firm's website. I had won a regional design award the previous spring, which my parents acknowledged with a card that said, "Congratulations," and nothing else. I kept the award on my desk at work. I kept the card in a drawer somewhere. I knew which one meant more to me. The night of the opening, I wore grey, not a statement colour, just a good dress I'd had for 2 years, the kind that reads as professional in any room. I drove myself. I arrived 20 minutes after the listed start time because arriving late to something you weren't invited to felt marginally more graceful than arriving early. The building stopped me for a moment, the way my own work sometimes still did. The warehouse facade was exactly what we'd intended. The original brick cleaned, but not restored to a false perfection. The new steel entrance frame understated. The warm light spilling through the window wall onto the sidewalk in a way that made people slow down as they passed. Someone had wrapped small lights around the olive trees flanking the door. That part was my mother's touch. I was sure of it. It was the one thing I hadn't designed, and the one thing that made me feel, standing there, something I couldn't name precisely. Inside, the room was full. Maybe 80 people, all of them dressed well, holding wine in the kind of stemware that gets rented for evenings like this. I could hear a jazz trio near the bar. The ceiling did exactly what I had needed it to do. It made the space feel enormous and intimate at once. The old Douglas fir beams running parallel to the long dining tables, the industrial pendants casting pools of warm light that drew the eye upward and then back down to the faces around you. I got a glass of wine from a passing server. I found a position near the east window wall, the one I had spent weeks arguing for when the development group's project manager kept suggesting we close it off to improve the HVAC efficiency. I had been right. You could feel it from across the room, the way the window poured the eye and somehow made everyone inside feel more present, more lit. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I turned. A woman about 10 years older than me, dark blazer, the kind of watchful expression that usually meant either press or money. "It really is," I said. "Do you know whose design it was? The architecture, I mean. The bones of this place are extraordinary." I took a sip of wine. "I heard it was a local firm," I said. "My mother found me 20 minutes later." I watched her clock across the room, saw the moment her eyes landed on me, saw the series of small expressions that crossed her face in quick succession. Surprise, confusion, and then the one I knew best, the careful neutral look she deployed whenever she needed to manage a situation. "What are you doing here?" she said when she reached me. Her voice was low. "Getting some wine," I said. "It's a nice event." "We talked about this." "You talked," I said gently. "I listened." She glanced around the room. "Your brother doesn't know you're here. This is his night, and I'm not here to make it his night about me," I said. "I'm just here." She studied my face for a moment, and then, because she didn't know what else to do with a daughter who wouldn't be redirected through social pressure, she moved away to find my father. I saw him before he saw me. He was near the host stand with a man I recognized as the real estate developer who had brought the warehouse project to my firm. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of confident that came from having been right about enough things over enough years. They were shaking hands. My father looked the way he always looked in rooms like this, slightly too deliberate, performing a comfort he hadn't entirely earned. Then the developer said something and my father's hand stilled in a handshake. I was too far away to hear the words, but I watched my father's expression go through the same series of revisions my mother's had, only slower. His eyes moved across the room and found mine. I raised my glass slightly, just enough. My brother came to find me a few minutes later. He moved through the room with an ease that had always been his particular gift. People reached out to touch his arm as he passed, said things that made him laugh, and he received it all without any sign of effort. He was in his element, which was wherever the warmth was. "You came," he said. "I wasn't going to miss it," I said. "Congratulations, the room is full." He looked around, and I could tell he meant it when he said, "It turned out better than I imagined." "The building is good," I said. He looked at me. "How did you know the developer?" "We've worked together before. He just told Dad that the architect on the warehouse conversion was." He stopped. He looked at my face for a long moment. "It was your firm, it was. You designed this." "Most of it. I had a team." He was quiet for long enough that someone nearby laughed at something and the sound felt too loud. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't know how it would land," I said honestly. "I didn't know if you'd want to know, or if you'd feel strange about it, or if Mum and Dad would make it into something it didn't need to be." He looked at the ceiling, at the beams. "That window," he said, gesturing toward the east wall. "I almost told them to board it up. The contractor said it would save money." "I know," I said. "Someone talked them out of it." He looked at me again, and this time the look was different, quieter. "How many of these have you done? Projects like this?" "This is my 14th completed build. I have 2 more in design phase right now." 14. He said the word like he was calculating something. "Do Mum and Dad know that?" "They know I work in architecture." "That's not what I asked." "No," I said. "They don't." My father appeared at my brother's shoulder before either of us could say anything else. His expression had settled into something controlled and careful, the way it always did when he was moving through territory he hadn't mapped. "The developer was telling me about the firm that did the conversion," he said. He was looking at me but talking in the plural, as if addressing the room. "Her firm," my brother said, and there was something in his voice I hadn't expected, something like pride, and also something like the beginning of an accounting. "The structural renovation," my father said. He paused. "The ceiling." "And the window wall," my brother said. "I almost closed that off. She didn't let them." My father looked at the east wall for a moment. Then he looked back at me. I didn't fill the silence. I'd spent too many years trying to fill silences that didn't want to be filled. "I didn't know," he said finally. "No," I agreed. "You should have told us." I looked at him steadily. "You asked me last Christmas if I was still doing the drafting thing. I had just completed my 12th project. I've won a regional design award. My name is in the firm's portfolio." I kept my voice even, not angry, just clear. "I've been telling you. You just weren't listening for it." He didn't have an answer for that, which was, in its own way, an answer. My mother found us a few minutes later, drawn by whatever family radar had always let her navigate toward tension. She looked at the 4 of us, read something in the way we were standing, and I watched her make a choice. The choice to be present instead of managed. "The developer told your father," she said to me. "I know, you designed this building. The structural and architectural work, yes." She looked at the room the way I had looked at it from the sidewalk, like she was seeing it for the first time and for the 100th time simultaneously. The ceiling, the window, the light. "I spent 3 weekends choosing those pendant lights," she said slowly. "They look perfect," I said. "Honestly, they do." She turned to me, and her eyes were doing something complicated. "I told you not to come tonight. You did, and you came anyway. I designed the building. It felt like something I should see finished." She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the jazz trio moved into something slower, and the room's energy shifted slightly, became more intimate as the evening settled. Long enough that I stopped waiting for her to say the right thing. and started just being there, in the room I had built, with the family that had so long failed to see it. "I'm sorry," she said. "It came out smaller than I think she intended. Tonight, telling you not to come, that was wrong. And the other things, all the times she stopped. I'm sorry, I had imagined some version of this moment many times. In my imagination, I had felt vindicated. Standing there, I felt something more like exhaustion and relief, the way you feel at the end of a very long drive when you finally see your exit." "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I didn't know what you were building," she said. "I know." I looked at her. "But I was always building something, even when no one was watching." My father did not apologize that night. He said very little after the moment by the east window wall. But I caught him twice, looking at the ceiling with an expression I hadn't seen from him before. Not pride exactly, more like recalibration. Like a man who had been reading a map wrong and had just been shown the correct orientation. My brother walked me to my car at the end of the night. The street was quiet. Our breath fogged a little in the February cold. "I want to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to know I'm asking honestly, not because of tonight." "Okay, would you want to be involved in the next one? The second location if it happens?" "Not, I mean, with real work. Paid work. I would bring you in properly." I looked at him. "Your investors would need to approve the firm." "I know, I'd make the case." "Then yes," I said, "I'd like that." He nodded. He stood there another moment in the cold, hands in his pockets looking at the building. "It's good work," he said. "I mean it. I ate dinner in there tonight and kept looking up at the ceiling and feeling like I'd been given a gift I didn't know I was getting. I thought about all the Sunday calls and the car at 16 and the New York graduation and the emoji texts. I thought about instant noodles and 80-hour weeks and the award on my desk at work and the card in a drawer somewhere. I thought about a girl who rearranged her bedroom furniture to test different configurations and whose father called it a phase. I've been leaving gifts in a lot of rooms," I said, "and not telling anyone." He laughed just a little. "Maybe start telling people." "Maybe," I said. I drove home alone. The heat in my car was still broken. My hands were cold on the wheel and the city was dark and quiet, and I thought about the building behind me, my 14th project, the one my mother had decorated and my brother had filled with people, and my father had stood inside without knowing whose hands had shaped the space around him. I thought about the east window wall and the argument I'd won, and the light it would let in on a Saturday morning service, warm and specific, angled exactly right. I had built something real. I had always been building something real. It just took standing in the finished room, all of us together, for anyone else to finally see it. I've thought a lot about that February night since it happened. Not the grand part of it, not the moment the developer said my name, not my father standing under the ceiling I'd engineered and finally going quiet. I think about the drive there, the broken car heater, my hands on the steering wheel, cold, and the letter on my counter at home. And the choice I made, somewhere on that dark road, to just show up anyway. That choice didn't come from anger. I want to be clear about that, because it would be easy to frame it that way, and it wouldn't be honest. I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I wasn't keeping a score. I went because I had worked on something real, something I was proud of, and there's a point you reach, quietly, without announcement, where you stop asking for permission to exist in the rooms you've helped build. That's what no one tells you about being overlooked for a long time. The damage isn't just emotional, it's practical. You start to believe that your work only counts when someone with more authority validates it. You wait for the acknowledgement before you let yourself feel the accomplishment. I did that for years. I won an award and waited for my parents to make it feel real. They sent a card. The award was still good. The work was still good. I just hadn't fully understood that yet. What I've come to believe is that the way my family treated me for all those years wasn't malicious. It was a failure of attention. My father wasn't cruel. He was incurious. There's a difference, and the difference matters because one of those things can change. Cruelty is a choice someone keeps making. And curiosity is a habit that breaks the moment something breaks through it. My father stood under those Douglas fir beams and recalibrated. Not all the way, not in one night. But something shifted, and that shift was real, and I've learned to value real things over complete things. My brother asking me to work on his next location. That meant something. Not because I needed the work or the validation, but because it was the first time he had ever looked at what I actually did and said, I want more of that. That's the kind of recognition that doesn't require the other person to feel bad about the past. It just requires them to see clearly in the present. I built 14 projects before anyone in my family knew what that meant. I did it because I loved the work, because I was good at it, because something in me had always understood that the effort you put into something in private is what gives it its integrity. No one can take that from you. Not a family that forgets your graduation. Not a father who calls your career the drafting thing. Not a mother who tells you to stay home on a night that was partly yours. The east window wall lets in light at exactly the angle I calculated. Every Saturday morning service, it falls across the dining room and makes people look up from their plates and go quiet for just a second, in the good way. I built that. I know I built it. That's enough.